Talk real quick, if I can make it quick. I get carried away sometimes. It is a Thursday, July the 16th. Jove. So I would like to talk about racism and this social engineering that is going on inside of the United States, which is so using just a little bit of history and using a little bit of common sense to debunk all of that funk that all of these young idiots, right? Like these millennial turds are all sporting and pushing and doing nonsense, right? So it's not racism. The problem is the state, okay? And when I say the state, I'm talking about every state of states, right? The political construct, right? The United States Incorporated, right? Because that all is owned by foreign interest. So they have no interest, like what you or I, born in America. Like, I'm born in America. I would call this my home, and then therefore I would love and I would, and I would try to take care of it the best that I can. However, if you literally own it and you're overseas, then you could care less, right? And that's how it works, okay? And so there's tons of the municipalities are Arabs. The Arabs own a bunch of America. The Chinese own a bunch of United States. The Japanese, everything in the United States is for sale. However, that doesn't mean everything in America is, and it gets so twisted. United States is different from America, right? Blah blah blah, and back and forth. So, anyways, so here is I'd like to start off with first off in 1086. There was a Domesday Book, is what they called, and it was compiled by William the Conqueror, William the Bastard, right? Who was a Viking, and he Norman Viking who went in and took over everything. It records the number of households, the economic resources, who owned the land, and the tax paid to the king. And actually, the current royal family right now, Queen Elizabeth II, is offspring of William the Conqueror. Okay? And the tax paid to the king for almost every settlement in England. This map shows every place in Domesday that can still be located today in England. Domesday is kind of like the doomsday, right? And so these are little dots. Each little dot represents like this one represents 5 households. That has 11. That has 0. That has 12. Right? 28. 9. So every one of them has something different. And the slaves were tallied up. And I'm going to assume that these were all white slaves. And I'm going to assume that these were the people that were already living there. And I'm going to assume, because sovereignty happens one of 3 different ways, right? Sovereignty can only be gained of one of 3 different ways. One, first and foremost, is through conquest, right? With guns and fighting and willing to kill or die. 2, through inheritance. So once you have gone out and killed and died and this and that, right, then you think that whenever you have any offspring, you are going to want to give that to them, right? That's just common sense, right? And then third, would be as in the case of if it's granted, which in the case of United States Incorporated, granted the Indians, Native Americans, an element of sovereignty where their nations are sovereign nations to various degrees, right? And so, in other words, the little bit weird is that if I came, which there's probably millions of people in the United States, seeing how I do know for a fact that most of my ancestry came from England. Now I'm certain that a lot of these people that were here, these slaves, are some of my ancestors, right? But they all showed up in the New England area, so yeah, I just lost my. So what I'm getting at is, oh yeah, so I don't know how this works because a United States citizen is a 14th Amendment citizen, which is, and I'll get into that a little bit later, which is a civilly dead entity, right? So a United States citizen, you have to be a United States citizen in order to have any federal or federal corporate state government position, right? To be employed by them. So you have to become a second class citizen. You have to be a U.S. citizen, right? And it's a civilly dead entity, which means it has no civil rights, right? So it is not protected by the Constitution, right? But they say that it is. But if you ever have to experience anything in life, any hardship in life, where the state is involved, you will find out very quickly that it is not. For an example, when I went to court, I already knew this stuff, and there was a guy, Duckworth, right? And he showed up for my lawyer. The lawyer did not show up, but he did, and he tried to get me to sign some stuff. And I asked him, because I knew the answer, I said, hey, does the honorable judge honor the Constitution? And he says, I don't know. And I'm like, oh, what do you mean you don't know, dude? You know, are you stupid dumber than a box of rocks, aren't you? Right? You don't know? That's another word, that's code word for no, he doesn't. Right? And I'm just too much of a coward to admit it, because that's all that they're operating on is nothing but deception. Lies. They're just a bunch of liars. Liars at law. And they call them liars at law, and they say that they're practicing because they never are in law. If you get married, right? What happens? If you're a man and you get married, you pick up your mother and father-in-laws, right? Your in-laws, right? Because these people literally are, as far as the law is concerned, they become part of you, and now they are in law with you. However, right, a lawyer that is practicing law, so if you're always practicing, that means you're never ready for battle or for the competition. You're just practicing, and they're practicing law because what they're doing is admiralty law, right? They're not law of the land would be constitutional law. The American constitutional law is the law of the land, and they're practicing that. But what they're really involved in is that admiralty law. Okay, and so what I find ironic is that if I came, which I did, I come from Pennsylvania, good since the 1700s. As far as I knew, I never lost so-called sovereignty via conquest. We were not, all of my family was up north in the New England regions, right? And so even during the Civil War, I don't know if so. The Civil War, if you were a prisoner of war, all of the South, they lost all their sovereignty because they fought, right? And they became prisoners of war. And so then the 14th Amendment, right after the Civil War, the 14th Amendment was created, and that was the United States. Corporation, that's the United States citizenship. And what they did was they took all of the freely emancipated, because they newly emancipated, they're not free. To be emancipated and be free is two different things. Emancipation means that they were taken from their sovereign owners, right, who are no longer sovereign anymore because they became conquered, right, in the south, and they were taken from their at one time sovereign owners, and they were fighting. The southern people were fighting to keep and maintain their sovereignty, and now they were transferred. The title was transferred and ownership was transferred over to United States Corporation, which is actually a British owned, right? So the Brits never left. They've owned everything from the get go, and the people, the original colonists, were pretty much owed most of their allegiance to the Brits, and they're all like they're all from the royal family bloodline and stuff like that. Right? So that's how it is, and so you got 1086, and these are the amounts of slaves in 1086, right? And then if you go to the burgesses, which would be where the royal families were kept, right? The royalty, and then they even have the priest. So there's a couple priests, and a priest would have a status just below royalty, right? So you would have the priest, right? You would have the burgesses, or the royalty, then the priest, and then the smallholders, I guess, right? And then villagers and slaves. However, most of those could all, maybe not the smallholders, because I'm not exactly sure what that means, right? Obviously, they held some sort of land or capacity, I guess. However, slaves, villagers, royalty, and priests. And again, don't know how many exactly those are, because one has 33 households, this one's got 32, that one has 29. However, if you were to have an idea of, so let's look at fisheries and burgesses. So there is more fisheries. This was the mills there, the salt houses. All right, so 1086, white slaves. Tons of white slaves. Okay? Now, then my next thing would be the Moors, right? So, if you know what the Moors are, this was Islam. Islam is the political construct that uses the Muslim religion, right? No different than United States Incorporated is the political construct that uses the Holy Bible. And I find it ironic that the Holy Bible, right, that the Roman Empire used to call itself the Holy Roman Empire. Now, I don't know how holy it was, right? However, Rome is still exists, right? And it's the center of holiness. And so the Holy Roman Empire, the Holy Bible, and whatever. So Islam started to move outwards, right? And they picked up a huge following, who was the Moors. And the Moors, right here at the Strait of Gibraltar, right, which is, they just crossed there, and they ransacked, raped, and pillaged, and took everything from Portugal and Spain and Corsica, Sardinia, Sicily, Malta, right? They went in for like nearly 700 years or so. I'm not a huge historian, and so don't quote me on all of this. However, most of everything, just some numbers and stuff, I don't have exacts, right? So this is a broad stroke here, okay? So roughly 700 years, let's say. They conquered and they showed up and they killed everybody and they took everything, and all of Europe at that time, with the Holy Crusades, they were fighting off all of the Muslims. No, they were fighting off Islam. They were fighting off the spread of Islam, the politics, right? Which had Muslims at the core of it. So this happened, and this stayed in effect till like about the 1600s. So if you were to go and you just pull up Moors, right, you start seeing all kinds of pictures, right? Look like that. That looks like a white guy. Right? So they were wealthy, and they were powerful, and they had a strong system, and there's no doubt in my mind that they were not sailing back and forth over to the to North America back in like 1400s and shit like that. No different than Christopher Columbus. They had that capability, right? Because one thing is for certain, that Islam and the Muslims have and had great, a mental capacity, and right, they know what they're doing. They have for thousands of years, right? So you got that, and then to go. Here's one. I saw where it says 1600s. So these are Moors. We're talking 1540. You can go down through. It's got the history of them all and all that kind of stuff. Islam in Spain. Via conquest, right? After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, then they started attacking and killing and whatever. And so here's what it is. (1609), there was an expulsion, right? And so there's 1619 is when what Spike Lee talks about. It was apparently the first slaves in America. I mean, these people are, this is some bullshit, right? The 1619 project. I saw him talking, and he had a shirt on that said 1619, and I guess a white American racist. So these people were racist, right? Meanwhile, the Moors were attacking, and they attacked them for hundreds of years, right? Raped the women, killed the men, and all that kind of stuff. However, right? And then once the white people, once white Europe got a hold of them, so they're the last to lose the grand battle, is how it works, right? So if the white Europe did not go and spend hundreds of years and go slide into the Dark Ages, right, because of all of the time, money, and energy that it took and they consumed to go and fend off all of these foreign invaders who were black people on one side of the fence, and then just Middle Easterns on the other side of the fence, right, of the Mediterranean, right? Now these people so now they get these, and these are all prisoners of war, right? These would all be prisoners of war. So for an example, right, for example, some group of Moors come showing up into your village. They try to ransack it. You manage to fight them all off, and there's a few survivors, right? And what are you going to do? You're going to enslave them. And what's your children going to do? They're going to enslave them too, right? And they're going to do this righteously, right? You're going to be righteous about that, right? And then your children's children, right? So now your grandchildren, they're going to probably enslave them, and the children of the slaves are going to be enslaved, right? And there's going to be no mercy, and there's going to be no heart There's going to be no warm, fuzzy feelings about this, right? These people know for a fact and witnessed all this great loss and suffering and tragic events. So if you manage to survive and you were black and you got caught, you're going to pay for it, and so is your offspring, right? And this is going to go on for a couple hundred years, probably at least 3 or 4 generations, up until the point in which, well, like it is now, the state is now involved, right? So if you go back into 1940s or whatever, when they really got 1950s or so, when they got the United States government started to school everybody. Well, that was whenever. Now that's just nothing but indoctrination. So all of the children at that point aren't going to know anything except for what they've been told, right? And their parents are also not going to know, not going to remember any of this kind of stuff. And the facts are, I'm almost 50 years old, and I'm just kind of finding this out just through my own investigating and through my own thinking. That is, most importantly, just through my own thinking, right? Because everywhere I go, all of the narratives are doing all the thinking for me, and it's all half-ass, right? So I find it ironic that Spike the Joint Lee picks a number and then decides to end there. Like there wasn't a whole shit ton of history to create that came up to this number. So, in other words, what you could do if you were white out there and you really wanted to get back in this, with all of this social engineering stuff that's going on, right? And you were white, what you could do is you could go and create a movie about the Moors, right? And then you could go and have a whole story based on all of these black warriors that showed up and started killing everybody and raping all the women and everything like that. The facts are that I have my DNA tested with Ancestry.com, and behind this M is Mali, Mali, and that I have less than, it says on my DNA, less than 1% Mali. So in other words, but I also have, I got Iberian Peninsula, which is a huge portion of the Iberian Peninsula, I didn't know, has a negative, Rh negative blood, right? So what I'm getting at is I'm thinking most likely the reason I have a little bit of Mali in me is because an African rolled up in here and raped one of my grandmothers. Right? That's how it worked, right? So, and am I racist at this point? No, I could care less about anybody's color of skin. However, there's a couple. Right? Yeah, it is. Right? They looked like they were living pretty well, right? They had money, they had power, they had control, they knew what they were doing, right? And so it brings us up to now we are in United States, in one of the most racist countries in the planet. It's nothing but racism, when in actuality, there are millions of black people living in the United States, living better than I am and most of the people that I know in my family, right? Millions of them, right? And, good for them, because I would be, I don't hate on anybody who's successful, because I'm not the judge and jury. Obviously God, right? Obviously God has an agenda, and we all come back for some reason to experience something. And obviously maybe I screwed up in the last life, and maybe I could go get nothing but shit all of my life, and maybe that's what I deserved. I don't know. We'll find out. But here, the next thing would be Dred Scott versus Sanford. Now, this is actually, was originally SAN without the D, and that was on purpose. I think it was a mistake that they did in the records on the original, and that's why, like, here Sanford. However, whoever did this page did it on the correct, but they dropped that. And the why? Because this was all a conspiracy, right? A conspiracy, whatever you want to call it. It was just pre-planned, right? Premeditated. These are very intelligent people, and they had a system devised, and they're moving forward into one major goal, and that would be the same kind of goal that was back with William the Bastard, right? William the Bastard kept just about everybody that wasn't royalty were second-class citizens, and so his offspring are now over in America, and they're doing the same thing that they did over in England for thousands of years, or for at least 1,000 years, roughly, right? And so what this says is, this was back in 1857, and it was a landmark decision of the U.S. Supreme Court in which the court held that U.S. Constitution, the Constitution of the United States, which is the corporate bylaw Constitution. It wasn't the original one of 1785 or whatever, where it was the Constitution for the United, with a little u, with a lowercase u, states. Right? Because united is not a proper noun. All proper nouns get uppercase, right? And so united is not a proper noun unless, of course, it is the name of a corporation, and then you would have an uppercase united. All right. So it was not the U.S. Constitution, right? United States Constitution was not meant to include American citizenship for black people. For any person that wasn't white, regardless of whether they were enslaved or free. And so the rights and privileges, the privileges that the Constitution confers upon American citizens, could not apply to them. The facts are, I'm not even an American citizen now, because an American, you would not even be literally considered a citizen. See, this is trickery, word trickery. Why is it that this is pronounced with an S? Okay? If you put C-A-T, it is cat. If you put C-R-I-M-E, it's crime. K, right? So why is it citizens? And then, so what it really is it's a little Jedi mind trick, right? So when you're saying something, your subconscious is picking something up. You're talking to your subconscious, and sit is Zen. Sit in Zen. Sit in Zen. Zen is a peaceful place, right? And you're supposed to sit there and sit in your peaceful place. Do not stand up, right? Because a sovereign would stand for himself, right? But a sit in Zen citizen would, and let alone, there's also an aspect of C is the third letter of the alphabet. And the people who design all of this kind of stuff, they're big into numerology. Believe it or not, I don't care whether you believe it or not. They are into numerology. And number three, is the director of, and I'm not going to get into too much because I don't want to divulge too much information to people, because some of this I would like to keep to myself, actually. And so it is, the number three is the director of negativity towards men, right? And which is weird because Catholicism, and what's weird is cathode. I'm an ex-electrician, and cathode and anode. Cathode would be the negative side, right? So Catholicism, and what they're doing is, to a certain degree, there's light and dark with everything. Shadow, every light casts a shadow, right? And and it isn't actually kind of important that people struggle, because it's only through struggle and trial and error in which you can build yourself, your soul, right? So whatever. Again, I don't care one way or the other. I just talk. I just talk about things in a purely objective viewpoint slash perception slash opinion. So, anyways, and I find it ironic that this was a black slave, right, Dred Scott, and here's a picture of him right here. And then I thought it was funny because the first time I saw him, the first thing I thought of was Sanford and Son, and I love old Red Fox. He was cool. I still watch it even to this day. I like it. Sanford and Son, Dred Scott and Sanford, right? Versus Sanford. A little strange, a little weird. However, what this boiled down to was he actually went to court and he found a lawyer. I can't find a lawyer. And this is just for stupid little shit that started it. And the crazy part is I literally have SWAT teams attacking me, and I got a guy across the street beating me almost unconscious with a baseball bat, and the sheriff's office doesn't want to have anything to do with that. However, they do bring a SWAT team because I'm calling on the phone asking them too many questions, and I'm calling around and I'm asking questions about the fraud that they're all in the middle of. So now they need to pull out the big guns and try to scare me and intimidate me into getting into their possession, into their hands. And then they could literally have killed me and literally just get away with it. They have full immunity. And so here's another thing I find crazy is that the former sheriff, Richard Mack, in which I had a conversation with, I come to see that he was fighting for state sovereignty. So his whole thing, and I didn't see it that way because I had not done my proper research, the proper studying. I looked at it just on the surface, and I saw sovereignty and stuff like that. And there's sovereignty mentioned many times in everything that he has to do, which is a little odd. But then I come after starting to dig. After that, I witnessed what I did with him. I started looking in, and then I realized, oh, he's talking about state sovereignty. So he's all for fighting the feds for state sovereignty. However, then he ends his little mission, right? And so I'm not allowed to have sovereignty, right? And whenever I claim sovereignty, what I'm claiming is constitutional capacity, which I did not know that I lost it in some sort of manner, but I find out that I lost it in 1933. But even more importantly, I really lost it on the third round, right? So what had happened is every 70 years, there's a bankruptcy, right? So you're paying for, internationally, a bankruptcy lasts for 70 years, right? And so 1929, so right around 1930, there was the Black Tuesday, right, where the stock market crashed and we went into the Great Depression. And then only a couple years later, right, they went and confiscated everybody's gold in 1933. And then they did, because nobody had any gold and everything, now we were completely, we were all became slaves, serfs, to serve as surety for the debt. And so now that's where I lost my sovereignty, so to speak. It was we didn't really actually lose it via conquest, unless you want to say that the trickery was conquest, but we didn't lose it. We as Americans just gave it away, I guess, is what happened. I wasn't there, and I can't see. I do know that, like I don't. I look back and I was like, where was the military for this? Well, the military is United States military, right? All of these people, see, there's another level of deception. All of these young kids, and that's why they get young kids, right? Because I'm almost 50 years old. I have just as much capability to go out and start exercising, and I'm just as in much good. I'm probably in better shape than a good portion of the young millennials right now. These fat and lazy and stuff like that. And I have, but the problem is for me, for as far as the this United States Incorporated is concerned, is I just have a little bit too much knowledge, capability to think for myself. I'm more of a burden for them because they can't control me in like they can control a young 18-year-old kid. I know for a fact. Whenever I was 18, they were like, "I'll sign up for the to vote." I was like, "What? Who?" They wanted to know what party. I'm like, "I don't know. I have no clue what's going on with this kind of shit, right?" So I just picked Democratic, and they were like, "Why Democrat?" When in actuality, I guess I was a Republican. But it turns out that the only reason I picked the Democrat Party was because of John F. Kennedy, right? The only reason, John F. Kennedy. My perception, my logic was, if a man gets his goddamn head blown off, then obviously he was doing something to prove that proves that he was doing something to in the regards to trying to take care of his people, the country. And everybody else is getting their asses kissed, and this guy gets his head blown off. Right? Yeah, I'll pick that guy. He sounds like a real leader. Okay? So, anyways, what happens is the Supreme Court, in 1857, this guy manages to find a lawyer. I don't know how the hell he did that. Well, no, I do. There was a guy that his master would leave and rent him out to this other guy. I believe that's how it went. So the guy did it pro bono, right? And I can't even get my own lawyer that was state appointed. I'd never even seen him the whole time the case was. And then on the second court date, I got another lawyer, and I never seen or talked to him ever. And here, this black slave, right, gets to actually take his bullshit into the Supreme Court. And there's actually two people that agreed with him, which that's pretty cool, right? And this guy, this black slave, is pretty much a badass. I mean, how much nuts do you have to have, right, to be a slave? And he turns around and he tried suing his master, and is stating that his master held him captive. And so then they go and they said that it was voided by the 13th Amendment, and the 13th Amendment is the only one that actually protects us to the Constitution, which abolishes slavery. Right? And the 14th Amendment, which grants guaranteed citizenship for all persons born naturalized in the United States. Now, this is the corporate zone, Washington, D.C., and all of its territories. Right? That's not America. Naturalized. You're born in Washington, D.C., you automatically become a United States citizen. If you naturalize, you'll become a United States citizen. And what they were doing is, whenever they did the big explosion where they were bringing over people in the 1920s and stuff like that, they brought over all of the Italians and the Irish and all these. They brought over millions and millions of peasants, right, to undermine everything again, right? So, and they all are United States citizens, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, right? So that's Washington, D.C. jurisdiction. You're a subject, right? And prior to the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, and then here the 14th Amendment turned people into subjects. And what had happened was that they right after Civil War, They took all of the prisoners of war, became 14th Amendment citizens, and lost their sovereignty. And then all of the blacks were taken and emancipated, which means they were transferred over. Their ownership was transferred from all of the sovereigns at the time that owned them. Since they became all United States citizens, well then all of their property, everything that they owned, became United States citizen, right? And that's how they twisted this whole thing. And so, anyways, what else? That's pretty much, that's how I've done this a couple of times already. For some reason, it will just shut off, and now I'm repeating myself. And then I can't remember did I talk about this in the last video, or did I just talk about this while this video was running? So, however, that was a legal fiction. When a case was filed, the two sides agreed on a statement of facts that claimed Scott had been sold by Dr. Emerson to John Sanford. However, that was a legal fiction. Dr. Emerson died and filed his 1847 suit against. So, legal fiction is a fact assumed or created by courts. This is what all the courts are doing with everything in this country now, right? And that is why you do not have any constitutional protection in criminal courts, right? You have it in civil matters, which, but everything in the Admiralty court zone, which is all criminal courts, all crimes are against the state, which is a fiction, and it's a legal fiction, right? And it's a corporate fiction, so all crimes are against the legal, and so then the concept is also used almost exclusively in common law, particularly in and that's why classic example, legal presumptions. So I'm finding out that everything that they were operating on was the first thing that they did. They put in a claim, right, as an affidavit, making a claim, and it's all fictitious. And now they have the presumption, and presumption inside of the court is 100%. If I don't go, and I didn't know this, and my lawyer never taught me, they never said anything, I had to go and do a bunch of studying. And so the presumption stands as fact until it is proven otherwise. And so I think that's all that I really wanted to cover, basically. All right, this is we're all slaves, and I am more enslaved than my forefathers before me, and many of them worked and fought. I did find out that I am a son of a revolution, and I'm going to go and register myself as one. Right? I did find out that I go all the way back to 1635, right? And a very prominent man, I come to find out, and I'm not going to mention who his name is, and I like to keep most of that personal and private. However, what I'm getting at is there are millions of blacks that are living way better than I am. The United States corporation has gone out of its way to basically, the biggest obstacle in my whole life has been the United States corporation. For an example, I'm an electrician. If I thought it would be a very smart route to go, I enjoyed the work. I love going to work. I have no problem with working. In actuality, to go and work when I was working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, and I was just making bank. I felt so good about myself, right? I felt like a winner, right? And what the problem was is that because it's construction, once we built something, you would have to go and find another job in general, right? Because what had happened is there was all these placement agencies that showed up. So this is when I first started, they weren't there. And then after 9/11 and everything, they started creeping in. And then it started getting to the point where the last couple, like 8 years or so, right? It was everywhere that I was looking for work, it was all taken over by placement agencies, right? So so they came in as the middleman, and what they would do is they would rent me out for, like, let's say $80 an hour, right? And they wouldn't give me any benefit, nothing. They would just go and because the companies didn't want to keep people on the books because it was detrimental to them, right? Because then if a company hires you full time, then they have to start they got to start following all these laws of retirement and all this kind of shit. Well, it's a lot easier for them just to go and pick up a bunch of people in the placement agencies, right? And so now job placement agencies are the only way that I'm getting work. And then the biggest issue was the fact that there's 50 states. And now whenever I call, everybody says what I say. I'm an electrician. I tell them what I got, and they're like, excellent. Yeah. Well, I have 98% of the time, because of the way I talk and communicated with them, they could tell that I was on point. I know what my shit. And they would be like, yeah, absolutely, we'll hire you. Like right now, do you have a license for this particular state? And I'll be like, no. And they're like, oops, sorry. And we're talking like $45 an hour jobs, working 70, 80 hours a week, and right. And well, there's a big shutdown, right? Do you have a license for South Dakota? No. We got this big shutdown. It's going to be about 3 months. You're going to have to work, 7 days a week, 7/12s. You were all for that? And I'm like, yeah. I'll travel 1,000 miles. I'll drive 1,000 miles. I'll live out of the back of my truck, right? For that, that's what I'll do. I'll put in everything just to be able to work. And they're like, okay, great. Do you got a license for this? Nope. Oh, I'm sorry. How long do you think? Well, I don't know. How long does those assholes at the state want to go and dick you around for? It could take maybe 2. And and the facts are, well, we can't hold this job forever, right? And we plan on being done in three months. This job is only going to be 3 months long, and it's going to take you a month and a half to get all your paperwork and get everything and have the state sign off. It's all bullshit, and it affected and screwed up my whole life in every aspect. However, guess what? That's part of the learning now, isn't it? And I am a slave, no doubt, 100%. And I don't feel sorry, at the least, for any black people, because I'm right there. I don't know how many black people go and pick up a phone on a Friday at 6 o'clock in the morning and start calling in about fraudulent, fictitious warrant that's been created and they've been trying to contact for months, trying to get it all established and everything. And then just because they're calling, right? They have SWAT team on the front lawn, right? With some asshole with a high-powered rifle aimed at the house, like they're ready with the finger on the trigger, ready to fucking kill you. And they're using my own damn truck to prop up the gun that they're fixing to kill me with. And the facts are that if I walked out, all I had to do was just move one hand, and then they'd be like, oh my God, boom, you shoot. And, dead man can't talk, and dead man can't file, So, anyways, I think I'm done.